Assembly's Planning and Development Committee. We've been working extremely hard on a multitude of zoning, land use, and affordable housing related bills. You've heard significant points of contention. This is an opportunity to have a analysis of the proposed bills that were passed out of the Planning and Development Committee, which has cognizance on zoning, land use, and interactions with municipalities. I have with me Representative Kathy Kennedy, representing the 119th District, Representative Charles Ferraro, representing the 118th.
17th.
There you go. We also wanted to acknowledge that Representative Frank Smith also replied and will be joining us. He may be late or maybe a conflict arose. We also extended an invitation in a true bipartisan basis to obviously Representative Frank Smith and Senator James Maroney, as well as to the various town leaders that represent the area that affiliates with Representative Kennedy, Ferraro, Smith. And that would be Mr. Ben Blake, the mayor of Milford, as well as Laura Hoydick, the mayor of Stratford, and First Selectman Mr. Zioli of Orange. What I want to be able to do is be able to share with the audience via Facebook, and feel free to post questions as you learn from this related to some of the proposed bills and our conversation on it. And we will be able to engage in a dialogue of question and answers. But if I may, I want to be able to share with you some of the particular bills of interest. And if we can go share the screen with the audience. So we'll go right to the first chart, and that is Senate Bill 1024. It's an act concerning zoning authority, certain design guidelines, qualifications of certain land use officials, and certain sewage disposal systems. It is a comprehensive bill, and it is part of a coalition called Desegregate Connecticut, which has been an active and engaged advocate in regards to zoning and affordable housing throughout Connecticut. And some of the components of it that really is impacting a lot of local municipalities, one of which was the idea of transit-oriented development, which affords has of right and the removal of parking requirements. Now, what that translates to English is has of right means that there would be no local planning and zoning public hearings, that it gives the has of right based upon the language and the formulation as it relates to a half-mile circumference of any transit-oriented development like the train station at downtown Milford or main streets of respective towns. And it really creates kind of an idea of oriented development that looks at multiple unit housing without local zoning authority requirements. Obviously, this is a bill, as a result of debate and deliberation, was amended and taken out of the bill that passed out of the Planning and Development Committee. But the advocates through Desegregate Connecticut have reiterated that this is an integral part of their philosophy and approach, and they would like to be able to put that concept and the has of right and the requirements of the easing of parking requirements back into the amended bill. The other part of Senate Bill 1024 is that it raises the community sewage and septic capacity, which could lead to environmental concerns and afford greater housing development capacity. That is especially a point of consideration with coastal communities like Milford and Orange. And ultimately, the concern is that it creates higher density concerns and environmental concerns. Another is that it changes the definition of allowing local planning and zoning boards to consider character of a specific neighborhood that is a consideration in regards to planning and zoning approval of certain housing initiatives. So, and because of a feedback, which reiterates again that the input of your legislators and of individuals submitting testimony and input in these kind of processes. That is the objective of this informational session, to give you some particular talking points that you can go explore for yourself and give feedback to your legislators, and ultimately, as we proceed through the legislative process. As a result of our input and public's input, we changed the word character to physical site characteristics and architectural context. At least we have some degree of input. In other bills that are being proposed in the General Assembly, the word character has been removed, and we'll get to that. So Senate Bill 1024, and for those people that want to learn more about it, is a comprehensive bill that is significant in regards to the points that it's trying to emphasize and raise. Let's go to the next bill, if I may. And that is House Bill 6611. House Bill 611 is another bill that has been advocated by a specific interest group. And in this case, we call it the Fair Share Housing, which is a collaboration between the House Democratic Majority Leader, who I have great respect for, and the Open Community Alliance Advocacy Group. And it takes a look at using what the state of New Jersey has in creating a fair share calculation of dwelling units and a fair share number. The way I would just kind of summarize it would be it is a complement to the current A30G calculation, but it also includes a broader council of government, which we have instituted in the state of government in Connecticut, that is a intent to create a more collaborative, cross-town collaboration of economy of scale and collaboration. But it also interpreted by some people as a precursor to the potential of county government. But it uses these kind of cogs that would then kind of be able to use a calculator of fair share housing. What's particularly daunting to me in our deliberations in the Planning and Development Committee is twofold. One, for a town like Milford that has gone through some significant 830G challenges and have finally, to their town's credit, reached the moratorium, the possibility of this fair share calculator could render your 830G moratorium as not complete. And what I mean by that is the fair share calculator could add or subtract your housing requirements based upon that formula. We don't have the specific formula yet, and of course this bill may change, but that is another factor of the fair share calculator. Another factor of it that is a point of concern to me is the fact that if a town does not meet the fair share requirement, like the 830G statute, it would afford remedies. But in this case, rather than forcing 830G applications, as people have been familiar with, House Bill 6611, the Fair Share Bill, would use our court systems that would allow people that have been rejected or for reasons that they deemed as unacceptable. And if a town does not have a fair share of enough affordable and deemed accessible housing, that the courts would make that determination for the town, not the local planning and zoning board, and that it affords interveners that may not have an interested party or an interest in any particular projects to sue the town. It would be in essence a consent decree on our municipalities. And at the same time, it would also be, in my opinion, a chilling effect, because if the town were to lose in the court of litigation, they would be liable for all legal costs, both the plaintiffs and the defendants. So I think 6611, well-intentioned again, but nevertheless, the devil is in the details. The third bill of consideration is 6107. The concept of 6107 is the fact that it is an enabling zoning legislation that affords that section 8-2 of the Connecticut General Statute as it relates to local and planning and zoning board. And the concept of 6107 is, on a macro basis, the concept is that the state has the power of enabling our zoning and planning authorities in our municipalities, and that it is affording our local municipalities that right to enforce and enact planning and zoning policies, and that the idea of local control and home rule does not exist as it relates to the powers of the state versus local municipalities. That is an important concept that is kind of an overriding theme on a lot of these zoning bills. Is, does the state and its policymakers know better versus local planning and zoning boards and conservation, as well as water authorities and town municipal leaders, in being able to articulate what is needed for the town? I think the three bills that I've talked about is a component of trying to meet a need. Let me be clear. I truly believe that the state of Connecticut has a critical housing need, but the housing need of being able to create accessible, affordable, and diverse housing exists not only in our suburbs, but I truly believe it exists in our cities and in our rural settings. And I believe that the solution should be a collaboration between neighborhoods, local, state, and federal governments to creating solutions. Another potential bill that is not in here, because unfortunately, there is the potential of approximately a dozen bills that are spread between 4 different committees throughout the General Assembly that has unique components of zoning, land use, and affordable housing that could be incorporated into the last screen that we have here. We actually have in planning and development 2 dummy bills that were passed out of committee. Those are bills that could be used to place in substitute language as it relates to land use and zoning that could incorporate many of the concepts that we talked about, many of the concepts that are spread about in the 4 different committees: in housing, in finance and revenue, as well as in transportation, that could be used and used as a vehicle to pass a lot of these concepts moving forward. So don't get caught up with the numbers, but let's focus on the concept. So I've kind of broadly went over a lot of these bills. There may be other bills that incorporates a lot of the concepts that I broadly talked about, but I wanted to allow my my panelists, the esteemed legislative representatives that know their towns best. And we're focusing in on the towns that are represented by the panelists here. So if I may, through you, to go to Representative Ferraro and get his thoughts on some of the broader concepts that we talked about, and also your experience, Representative Ferraro, in how affordable housing, 830G, and how these kind of bills impact the towns as you know it best, and how one size, in my opinion, does not fit all.
Thank you, Senator Hwang, and you've done a great job giving an overview of the bills that are before the General Assembly. Probably no one's better qualified to do that than you as the ranking member of the Planning and Zoning Committee. To be fair, my area of cognizance is pretty far removed from planning and zoning. I'm on the Veterans Committee and Human Services, and I'm ranking member on Energy and Technology. Although there were some components in these bills that required future housing developments to have renewable energy components in them. This is pretty far removed from me, other than my experience over the last 7 years with constituents and public hearings in my 3 towns, which are West Haven, Orange, and Milford. And you spoke about the one size fits all. I'm probably the perfect person to talk about one size fits all, because I represent 3 very different towns, in that West Haven has already about 14% affordable housing stock, and has long been past the 10% threshold. And so there are literally no issues of affordable housing in West Haven. Milford has been on the cusp of just reaching the 10% and qualifying for a moratorium for literally for my entire legislative tenure, which has been about 7 years. And then, as you noted earlier, just recently achieved that threshold and qualified for that moratorium. And so, after all the work and the years of public hearings and the energy input from the community itself, to suddenly find that they no longer qualify for the moratorium, I think would be very upsetting for many constituents in the town of Milford that I represent. Orange is a very unique, small, rural agricultural town where zoning laws there have required private homeowners to own a minimum acreage, and that's been the character of that community. And most of the town officials there have expressed a strong desire to make sure they had adequate affordable housing for their community, but at the same time are very concerned that the character of their community would be altered by future 830G or affordable housing laws. So representing those 3 towns and representing 3 very different housing and situations and communities really accents the idea that a one-size-fits-all top-down solution is in many cases not only not fair, but very difficult for some towns to comply with. I think as much as they would like to improve the affordable housing stock, I think a more one-on-one approach with the stakeholders involved would be more of an amicable and efficient means for those towns to come up with solutions that would better serve the needs of various income levels of folks who are looking for housing. So with that said, these 3 bills are very concerning to me. The idea there might be 12 of them floating out there, in addition to, what we are dealing with as legislators regarding COVID and not being able to meet in person and having all these Zoom meetings and each of us having our own area of cognizant. It's very, very hard to be on top of all this. And I'm very appreciative and thankful of you, Tony, for holding this information forum, not only for us as legislators to be able to express, our desire to help where we can, but also to educate us and the constituents who are listening online. So thank you very much, and I look forward to my
Absolutely.
comments.
Thank you, Representative Ferraro. I'm so excited that we were able to have Representative Frank Smith join us, as well as Milford Mayor Ben Blake. Thank you very much for joining us. And truly, I want this to be an informational forum, and I don't know if Mayor Blake and Representative Smith was able to hear on the three bills that were a point of consideration. It's Senate Bill 1024, the Desegregate Connecticut bill. The second is House Bill 6611, which is the Fair Share Open Communities bill. That is the House Majority Leader's joint proposal. And the third bill under consideration is an Enable Zoning Act of House Bill 6107. But also, as I shared earlier, that there were many other bills, nearly a dozen, related to zoning, affordable housing, and land use that have floated between four different committees, from planning and development to transportation to housing, and in the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. So I don't know if Mayor Blake was able to hear the nuances of these bills, along with Representative Smith. I'm more than happy to go back and answer any questions as it relates to those bills. But I'm very, very appreciative that Mr. Blake and Representative Smith could join me, because I truly want this to be an informational session and wanting all viewpoints, because I've learned that quite a bit from former state senator representing Milford and Orange and the Woodbridge area, Representative Senator Schlossberg, who I work very closely as co-chair in the Housing Committee. And she has fiercely fought for Milford in regards to the experience on meeting diverse housing stock in the community. So I don't know, Mr. Blake or Representative Smith, if you were able to hear the initial presentation, but I certainly wanted to welcome you and thank you, because your insight is very valued to me as a legislator as we explore these type of issues.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate you hosting this informational forum. Good to see you, Representative Ferraro and Kennedy. Representative Smith and I actually just came over from a budget meeting for our local legislative body. As you know, Alderman Smith wears two hats. He is still an alderman in Milford as well as a state rep. So he's doing double duty, and we jumped from that. So we missed some of the initial presentation. So we apologize.
That's okay. We're so happy to have you there. I think in regards to, if I may quickly repeat and maybe get your thoughts and then follow up to Representative Kennedy, and we also extend the invitation to Mayor Hoydick as well as First Selectman Zioli, and they're in the same budget type of meetings that you are in. But in regards to 1024, Desegregate Connecticut's bill, I wanted to acknowledge and applaud the tremendous efforts of Desegregate Connecticut in raising the awareness of the need for diverse and affordable and accessible housing in the state of Connecticut. Some of their proposals are very visionary, and there are components that in the amended bill that were taken out. But from the feedback of Desegregate Connecticut's leader is there's a real strong push to get that reintroduced. And I know, as a former resident of Milford off of Seaside Avenue, one of the components of particular interest was Section 6 related to transit-oriented development and Main Street development that affords a half-mile radius of has of right multiple unit development and minimal parking requirements. That is one of the components. Accessory dwelling units is another component, but also some of the enforcement mechanisms, as well as sewer and septic capacity increases. We can get that detail to you. Another bill is 6611 that looks at a fair share Open Communities Alliance advocacy, which has the joint collaboration and support of House Majority Leader Jason Rojas, and that looks at using a COG recalculation of the fair share housing marketplace that puts Milford into a COG calculation. I don't know what the exact calculation, so I wanted to applaud you because of your tremendous work and leadership, as well as many of the other legislators here, of reaching the moratorium on the 830G for Milford. But the concept I said earlier was, with this fair share recalculation, that potentially the moratorium that you reach in Milford could be recalculated to be added to it or subtracted from it. We don't know the exact number. Another component of the fair share is the real concern in regards to using, if a town does not meet those fair share number calculators, that the court would be used as the determining factor, and that litigation and a consent decree kind of a stick would be the driver to make towns meet the fair share requirements. The third is the enable zoning statute of section 8-2, which is the broad concept that the state affords enable zoning legislation and authority to our local municipalities, and that home rule does not apply. And that to me is an important concept. I believe in home rule. I believe in my local planning and zoning and town leadership and conservation and watershed protection to truly know what is in the best interest in a collaboration with neighborhoods, state and federal authorities to find solutions. So that's in a nutshell. And with that, I love to get Mayor Blake's thoughts and concerns as a town leader. What are some of the thoughts that he has related to those three components? And what are some of the solutions he would like to recommend to us as legislators as we contemplate a compromise moving forward?
I appreciate it. I think everybody's vision is to create a diverse housing stock so that we can have world-class communities. And you mentioned former Senator Schlossberg. One of the pieces of legislation that was passed, I think 4 years ago, when she was chair of the Housing Committee with, I think, Vice Chair Rose, who was also a rep from Milford, the predecessor to Frank Smith. One of the components to that piece of legislation that was adopted was that each community has to have, at their local level, they have to adopt a housing plan. And part of the housing plan is that they have to stand up a housing committee to look at things like zoning and housing and how they all integrate. And that has to be approved by the Department of Housing. I think we all have, every town and municipality in the state has about another year and a half in order to complete that, have that approved by the legislative body, have that approved by the Department of Housing. And so that's something that we are starting to work on. We are starting to identify good, capable stakeholders to appoint to our housing committee here in Milford. I know that Fairfield is working on something very similar. And I know that we are working to develop a plan. We're actually partnering with our Council of Governments consultants in order to do that. So I think that's one piece of the puzzle that is being referenced in some of these proposed pieces of legislation, the interconnection and the nexus between planning and development and housing and zoning. So I think that's chipping away. Some of the goals for some of these pieces of legislation will be realized through legislation that had been recently passed, just not had been actually moved forward with at the local level yet. But I think that there is that requirement for those towns and cities to do it. I think it's June of 2023, but I'm not exactly positive. I know that it's incorporated into that piece of legislation that was adopted 4 years ago.
Well, thank you. And I actually have a couple questions already for you, Mayor Blake, but I wanted to acknowledge and welcome Representative Frank Smith, and then allow Representative Kennedy to also offer her thoughts and comments. And then if you are okay with it, I actually have a couple of questions that have already been raised by the audience that I'd like to be able to share with you and get all of your insights and perspective on. Welcome, Representative Smith. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Senator Wang, and thank you for the invitation invitation to join you. You're something of a celebrity to me. I only see you on Zoom, but I've always been impressed with your erudition and your eloquence. And I believe you're on the Planning and Development Committee too, right?
I am the ranking member, which kind of led me to this auspice. And I was one of the co-chairs with the esteemed Senator Schlossberg. And we worked very closely on the 830G reform, a slight tweaking that she led on. And it was the only bill that survived the veto of Governor Malloy. So yes, and this is the rationale for me to host this meeting, is truly to have a bipartisan input from local municipal leaders like yourselves.
Well, as I'm sure you know, and I know Representative Ferraro and Representative Kennedy also know, within our majority caucus, we are somewhat the representatives from Milford and the representative of other similar demographic towns like Fairfield and the others are somewhat suspect within our caucus because we have traditionally, and I mean for a long time, I was on the Board of Aldermen 20 years ago and remember having in 1999, having a conference with former Speaker Jim Amon, who wasn't Speaker yet, and Gail Schlossberg, who was entertaining a run for the state Senate then, who was still 4 years off, and Representative Amon saying to us that 830G was already 10 years old, but we would be dealing it for the rest of our lives. Now, 830G is something that falls within the auspices of the Housing Committee, of which I'm a member, where 8-2, which is the other part of this, I think, as you know, Senator Hwang, is something that is reviewed and monitored by the Planning and Development Committee. I thought we would get by this session without any discussion of 830G. It's obviously a very important and probably notorious state statute. I think if you walk up to anyone in the street of Milford and say name a state statute, that might be the only one they can name, because it is so well known for good and bad reasons. Now, I've heard leaders of my party in various conferences discuss it as a blunt instrument. Everyone seems to recognize that. What I didn't anticipate was coming from the planning side. For instance, on Senate Bill 1024, which is the Desegregate Connecticut bill, that a lot of these affordable housing that I think have laudable intentions and ambitions, and I am I don't withdraw from saying that we do need more affordable housing. I could have benefited from it some years ago when I wanted to move to Milford, and it was difficult to do so. So I do recognize and acknowledge the importance of it. And I think in terms of making ours a better town, but really as representatives to the state, these are things that do bear some review. I, however, like many of you, have the same feeling that we want to maintain some sovereignty and some self-determination within our towns. And we have a planning and zoning board, as Mayor Blake mentioned, that are working on a number of levels, including a plan of conservation development to do their job. And it's at Milford Point Road, which is up the street from me here. I can drive down that to Milford Center and go by no less than 7 housing complexes that were driven completely by an 830G appeal. As I started to say, what I didn't anticipate, that a lot of the racial issues have kind of been mixed into this, particularly on the planning side of this. And it's a very difficult thing to seem to be in opposition to that. But I do feel that there are some opportunities to change some of the language in it. There have been some things that have been removed from 1024 already, as you know, Senator. And I think that there is going to be a room. I'm new to the legislature, so I'm not privy to a lot of what the leadership decides. But I would say some of these are probably not going to reach at least in the House, Some others like 1024, which have a lot of support from within our conference, probably will. And my hope is to, as a vice chair of the housing committee, to participate in any new language that's going to be voted upon. But I think we all, everyone on this call, regardless of our parties, do recognize, and I think understand the importance of some of these initiatives. But also, I think we're all within good standing to say that we do want to protect the self-determination of our own town. I had a phone call with Christy McCarthy Vahey the other day discussing this very section about the term character, that it's been stricken from the language of the bill, and that kind of rankled me in the beginning because I'm a very strong advocate for our historic district here, and it uses the word character. It's got sort of a bad connotation lately, and has actually been written out of this with substituted with physical characteristics, architectural context, and the like. So, I think we, as I said, everyone on this call, I think we have the same motivation. There's different ways in doing it, and obviously different expectations for us all. I didn't mean to go on
I think
so
your
long.
role as the vice chair of housing is integral to the solution. And as I said earlier, before you and Mayor Blake came, I did say that the amended 1024 has moved forward, and that they did take input from advocates like myself to say character needs to be replaced with architectural consistency and design. And that was incorporated in 1024, but unfortunately it was not in 6107. So Representative Smith, thank you for your eloquence as well. And I want to go to Representative Kathy Kennedy and get your thoughts before we go to the questions. Questions are coming up. And I'm so glad that we truly have input from a diverse dialogue. And I'm so excited about this. I'm so grateful as well. Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Senator. And hello to everyone else that has joined us. I'm glad to see you here. So I would commend this, the sponsors of these bills, but they're just not going to do what they had hoped to do. And you touched on it, Representative Smith, when you talked about character. I know a couple of years ago when we first started the phase 1 of Milford's TOD, downtown development, that was one of the words that was instrumental, that I know Mayor Blake wanted to make sure that it fit into the character of Milford. And Milford does have a certain character. We aren't a one size fit all to a whole 100 and 62 communities in the state of Connecticut. So it's going to be difficult. The bills just aren't going to emphasize, just not going to put the emphasis on the affordable units in every single municipality. So I just don't think that specific to 6611, it doesn't support the income diversity that we're looking for. There's no balance. So I think we need to just keep it. I'd like to listen to what everyone has to say that's listening to us. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, though. I do represent parts of Milford and Orange, and they are both two very unique towns. Milford has a great deal of character. It's kind of like I think, Mayor, you've referred to our beautiful city of Milford as like a Cape Cod type town. And as Representative Farrar stated, Orange is like a beautiful farming town. And two very unique communities, and to mesh these kind of bills together, I'm not sure I can see it working, but I'm glad that we're having this discussion in a bipartisan manner. That gives me hope going forward. And I look forward to hearing to what our constituents are asking outside.
Well, actually, if I may, right to the audience, one of the big questions was through all of you as representatives of Milford, and Representative Smith as a longtime alderman, you've reached a moratorium. What could we in the state and the broader audience learn about your experience, your initiative to get to the moratorium, and the challenges you've had and the lessons that we could learn from it as we try to craft solutions? You're right. The bills that we've had adjustments and changes, and my hope and desire is we will still continue to have these kind of input and dialogues. But I'll start with Mayor Blake and saying, through your tenure, you've been able to reach a moratorium. What are some of the lessons learned, the challenges you've had, and that there is a tremendous will? That's important. As I talk to many of the municipalities, that perhaps the historical legacy of segregation, exclusion, and equity issues existed. But I know for many of our towns, if not most of the towns that I know of, there is a urgent motivation and a desire to create affordable, diverse, and accessible housing. How did Milford get to that moratorium? I'll begin with Mayor Blake and then go follow up with Representative Ferraro, Smith, and Kennedy.
Well, thanks again. Milford is a small city with a big heart. We have a very diverse group of folks that live here. We have people that are very wealthy, but Milford predominantly is a working class town. We have approximately 1/3 of our residents are considered low to moderate income through HUD. We're an entitlement community, and we have a diverse housing stock. We have everything from, single family homes to multifamily homes to apartments to condos to a large section of public housing. We have a whole host of different type of opportunities. We have, old former schools that have been converted into HUD housing. We have just a very diverse housing stock. We have multiple mobile home parks, including, one that has 175 units. To some degree, though, we had to kind of collect all of this information in order to reach the moratorium. We had to really take stock of our housing stock. Some of the adjustments that were made in the legislation from 4 years ago kind of recognized, the affordability of a mature town like Milford, a town that I think similar to Fairfield dates back 382 years, back to 1639.
Well, as Mr. P. Smith reminds me, Milford is older than Fairfield.
So we have a lot of our houses and a lot of our homes and a lot of our properties are mature. They were built years and generations prior to the 1990 legislation that folks refer to as 830J. But, given that, we had properties that we just had to identify that, clearly are affordable in nature. And we had to kind of recognize those, and those got identified, and that allowed us to secure, this 4-year moratorium and set us up for another 5-year moratorium that we're working to move forward with. But it really is recognition of the great lengths that Milford has gone through the many years to make sure that our housing stock is diverse. And even through our zoning, I mean, we have areas that have been zoned exclusively for multifamily housing. And a lot of the zoning has been there for years and decades. So it's not something that we have recently done, but we have kind of recently made sure that we have taken a fresh look at some of these different ingredients in order to make sure that, our affordability has been recognized.
Well, thank you. And your work and the entire town's work is great. And I always point to Milford's local leadership and understanding the unique aspect you just talked about as being one of the important considerations as we look at a top-down, one-size-fits-all. You have met those goals. I'm going to pivot the order again and start with Representative Kennedy first and go reverse to Representative Ferraro and Smith. Go ahead, Representative Kennedy, since we made you last time.
And I would echo and thank the mayor, our good mayor of Milford, Mayor Blake, who did work very hard with many parties to get to where we were, and with former Senator Schlossberg and State Representative Kim Rose. And Milford really worked hard to achieve where we are. So I'm not really sure what more I could add on that. But Milford's just so unique, and we are the little city with the big heart, and we kind of want to keep it the way we are and keep moving. There's still a lot of development going on in Milford. Still some more affordable housing that's going through Milford, but I think it's the word when you say 830G, people just jump back.
Well,
And yeah, so I would conclude with that.
I would offer my 830G is a well-intentioned idea, but nevertheless, it's been confronted with the unique challenges of each of the town's unique challenges, from land costs, construction cost, and the real demand of challenges. It's well-intentioned, but it's shown itself not to really address the need that we have. So Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Senator Hwang, and great to see everybody online here tonight. Um, Mayor Blake is kind of like the heartbeat of what happened in Milford with affordable housing. He was involved in every single conversation, every single public hearing, long before I got there as a state rep. And there were many people involved in the moving forward of Milford to reach the moratorium. Former Representative Pam Stanesky, when even before her, her predecessor, now Senator Maroney, was Representative Maroney. And everybody had their input and their energy and their insights on how to move the moratorium forward in Milford. The mayor talked about and touched on some very important ideas and processes that took place, and reimagining and re-looking at what qualified for affordable housing was an integral part of it. As you know, the Ryder Park situation wasn't even counted, and those folks are absolutely living in the guidelines of affordable housing. And it was important to distinguish, predatory type developers who maybe put together affordable housing units out of revenge because they didn't get their way with the local planning and zoning board, would put together a project, and they would have a certain percentage of that project designated as affordable housing. But it's important to differentiate between affordable housing and housing that people can afford. So, just because you designate a unit as affordable housing, but it costs $1,600 a month, it's not really affordable. And so a lot of the projects had to be evaluated, had to fit into the formulas, and it was found that Milford had all along the qualifications for qualifying for a moratorium, just wasn't counting it properly. So to bring it back to what is currently taking place in the current legislations, and I certainly respect the hard work of everybody's put in these bills that are coming out, but I am very concerned that, especially in the fair housing calculations, that the hard work and the effort and the sincere motivation of the people that came before me and the people still working on it, Mayor Blake and all those involved, that all that hard work and those sincere motivations to make sure that housing was diverse and affordable and something that could move the town of Milford forward without changing its personality. I'm hoping that these new formulas don't change that and have to push us back so that we got to start all over again.
Thank you, Representative Farrar. Representative Smith, you talked about your experience as an alderman and living in the community. What have you learned from some of your experience and seeing how Milford has evolved, and give us some insight and perspective of, as we determine policy moving forward in housing and in planning and development. What would your experience and insight offer as a Milford representative and what it has gone through?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. one thing I've learned in my time on the Board of Aldermen, which is I'm concluding my 10th year, and do expect to step down because I had I had no idea how intense this job got as a state representative when in the middle of session when bills start moving through committee. But I have a newfound admiration and respect for all of you and for. I told Kim Rose, I said, Kim, I owe you an apology. I thought you were exaggerating all this stuff because I just thought she did. And I spent a day today just dealing with my mail, dealing with questions, constituent matters, trying to read some of the bills. So it is a task to do it, a great honor to be put in that position. But what I've learned, and I think I bring to Hartford too, is the idea that at the local level, you begin to realize what the day-to-day thoughts and aspirations of your constituents. I ran for Board of Aldermen back in 1999, served for 2.5 years back then in the minority, in a distinct minority in those days. So I've seen it from both sides of the aisle, at least in terms of majority and minority. The idea that Milford is a very well-run town, and I know Kathy and Charlie know this too, and certainly Mayor Blake has been one of the major exponents of that. We had Mayor Riccitelli for 10 years, Mayor Blake for 10 years. We have a very bipartisan and very cooperative local government. And we have a great deal of pride in what we do and how we try to aspire to the vision that most of our residents see in our town as a small colonial town. There is probably sometimes well-founded, sometimes not, suspicion of any kind of, as I said, regionalism or any more impositions coming from the state or the federal level into how the town is run. 830G has always been seen as an alderman and now as a state representative as a well-intentioned law enacted over 30 years ago, which, as I said, I've had members of our leadership refer to as a blunt instrument because they recognize how sometimes corrosive it can be and lend itself to simplistic kind of characterizations, which when I go door to door, I find myself hearing it and saying the same thing. It is something that benefits the developers. If I was to ask who is the greatest beneficiary of 830G, I say it's about 10 or 11 guys that are building developers that do very well. It's been portrayed as a cynical law that is used by these developers. And this is another reason why some of the new tax coming out of planning and development with regard to oversight of zoning regulations can also be argued as a way of changing that balance. As Representative Ferraro said, Milford is a very desirable town. People want to come here. Businesses want to relocate here. We have had extraordinary growth over the past few years. It's no mystery that Milford is a place that a lot of young professionals, a lot of young families aspire to live. I grew up in Milford, but there was a time in my life I couldn't afford to live in the same neighborhood that I grew up in. So I'm glad to see that there are efforts being made, legitimate and genuine efforts being made. But that's, I guess it's one of the sacrifices we make for having a well-run and cooperative bipartisan government. Not to say we always get along or agree on things, but I think we do find ourselves in agreement when it comes to our trust in our fellow citizens and in our institutions, our planning and zoning board, our legislators, our educational system. Milford is a great place to live. It's a great place to grow up. And it's something that, and as the mayor says, there's a lot of things. We are well sewered. I never heard that word until Mayor Blake one time said, this is one of the reasons is we're well sewered in Milford, which, from a sanitary standpoint is a huge advantage for businesses, particularly coming to relocate here. We've been able to reduce taxes, mainly because of growing our grand list through good fiscal management. So it's always that feeling that because we do things well in Milford at the local level, that sometimes we can be seen as somewhat out of step with the rest of the state when either they're not able to produce or don't have the same kind of reality that we have. And there are incursions made into our local sovereignty. And, I agree with a lot of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle that nobody's in a better position to determine the character of the town than the people here that have given their time, life, and tax money to support. So I go into this now with a new front. 830G has been an ongoing effort. And the first day I was in to be sworn in, some of my colleagues took me aside and they said, you're from Milford. Milford they wait till they reach their moratorium in terms of their housing stock. They get the 5-year moratorium, of which we're into the 3rd year. And then they scream like stuck pigs when it's over because they haven't done anything to satisfy those housing requirements. I took offense to this to some extent because I know that we do. But a lot of towns in this state, like 20% of them or more, and you probably know better than I do, Senator, the amount of towns that comply. But some of these new legislation, particularly on 1024 and some of the others, concerning zoning authority, opens a whole new front to this. And I think it's important that we address this in a very coordinated, a very sober, and a very concerned way, so as to show our acceptance of those changes that we have within our society and within our state, and how we can work best within our laws, but also working to make this fair to the people in whose town it's being imposed. So I come to this meeting tonight looking to get as much input from my colleagues. And obviously the mayor knows our town better than anyone else. And I'm glad we were able to get here for this tonight.
No, I am so grateful.
Probably
Thank
the
you.
reason that our public hearing section was so short, because as I told the mayor, everybody complains all year, but when it comes to the public hearing on the budget, nobody shows up. We were over in 5 minutes.
Well, I'm glad there was a short meeting, and I completely agree, and I think we all agree that the status quo is not acceptable, and we have to find solutions moving forward. I have one more question. It's a combination of two, Mayor Blake. One is the question about regionalization, the COGS, and also the idea of efficiency and regionalization. And the second part is I've never heard a town over sewered, but there is the component when you increase density that there are sewer and septic capacity concerns. These bills significantly expand that. So there's some environmental and watershed considerations. And for a town like Milford, that is a coastal town, the delicate balance of the water and land ecosystem, as well as our waste management, is critical. So from a standpoint of regionalization, but also the environmental impact of increased density of sewer and septic capacity increases on these proposals. But before I go to you, I want to compliment all of you. Mayor Blake, you have one heck of a fabulous group of legislators that are your great Chamber of Commerce. I mean, they're pitching everything. I've got a slogan that Milford is a town with a big heart. Is that the slogan?
We're the small city with a big heart is our
Okay.
moniker, but if you're lucky enough to live in Milford, you're lucky enough.
You got a Colony Pizza downtown.
Well, so does Fairfield, but I think ours is just that much spicier, right?
Yeah.
So
Hot oil pizza. I'm
Yeah.
going down for one.
To your point about regionalization, I think theoretically we all love to embrace it. I mentioned the fact that I had a meeting today on housing, and through our COG, we are working on a housing plan in Milford, and we're working with the other 17 towns in our Council of Government. I'm sorry, 16 towns in our Council of Governments on this plan. It's going to be Milford centric, but we're working with the consultants through the COG. So we try to use opportunities to regionalize. Oftentimes it's more theoretical than it is practical, because New England towns, all towns in New England are very parochial to some degree. And I think probably too parochial. I think that it is healthy. It is good. It is good progressive planning to try to work with our neighbors on a whole host of things, not just housing stocks or zoning, but city and local operations, trying to make sure that, towns that have, very small populations in Connecticut, there are towns with a few hundred people. And then there are larger towns like Milford and Fairfield and New Haven and Bridgeport that have, hundreds of thousands. So we have to kind of make sure that at least those small towns, there is some type of collaboration. Even towns the size of Milford and Fairfield, there needs to be additional collaboration, because it makes sense from a financial standpoint. And the more people that you have, the better are the ideas, and the larger the diversity, the greater the group. And I think that's always beneficial and always helpful. I think the second part of your question, though, had to do with sewers. As Representative Smith said, we are well sewered. We have spent and invested in our infrastructure, though. Things that aren't very sexy, like sewers, we have put a lot of our time and resources into, because we saw the light at the end of the tunnel. One of the reasons why Milford has been so wildly successful, we are working on our sixth consecutive tax cut in Milford. We are positioned for our sixth consecutive tax cut, and that's because we've been able to grow our grand list. We've attracted businesses. This last year, we've had 467 businesses move to Milford in the middle of a pandemic. And one of the ingredients to that success is things like our infrastructure. We built up 260 miles of sewers. We have 2 sewage treatment plants that are able to process, one's able to process 17 million gallons of flow a day. One's able to process 11 million gallons of flow a day. We have 49 pump stations. We have invested a lot of our local tax money, a lot of our time and effort to making sure that we have the infrastructure and our roads and our bridges to be able to support new businesses that want to move here. And we've given them the stability with kind of a stable tax structure that they want to move here. Those are some of the things that we've done to kind of develop the town. But as Representative Smith said, it has made Milford a mecca for people to move. And, that's something that we want too. We want people to kind of enjoy the small city with a big heart. We have the longest coastline in Connecticut and a lot of great amenities. And I know you're coming from Fairfield that has, similar great amenities as well. So.
Listen, this is a zoning, but I got to tell you, it's also a great Chamber of Commerce pitch. I'm persuaded, and I think the other municipal leaders may be a little jealous after they see this. But I applaud you, and you're right, and that was the concern, right? You've got to meet the capacity, and it's an investment and cost significant municipal cost. And if we expand the capacity to accommodate the increased density, it's going to be a municipal cost, and that's a consideration. Representative Kennedy, I have to crack a joke because we spend so much time in our various committees that we share. Your cat has made the famous appearance.
Yes, he has. I am sorry about that, but he was very interested in these 4 bills. 1024 and HB 6611 and HB 6107. So yes, he was very interested. Thank you, sir.
The regionalization and the septic and sewer capacity increases.
To me,
Yes.
I think Mayor Blake had kind of said it best, but as much as we want to, and we want to be financially prudent, sometimes it just doesn't work that way. We do provide assists. I know our fire department, we assist our local towns. West Haven, we do coverage, that type of, but each town again is still unique, and we know what what works and what doesn't work in our towns. So it's a little bit of an overreach, I think.
Well, Representative Kennedy, I apologize for throwing you off by talking about the cat, but it is the star of many of our committee shows. Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Of course, as I said earlier, the mayor has his finger on such things as sewage flow and things like that that I couldn't possibly know. But to go up 30,000 feet and look back, it is very, when we look at regionalization, it has both good and bad connotations. And I think the mayor was trying to hit on it, that it's impossible to operate as an island community by yourself. You do need to have interaction with some other municipalities on certain issues, safety issues, cooperation between emergency type of services, I think are very important. But there are some things that the town itself knows better, especially when it comes to, a lot of these towns like Milford and Orange. They've done a great job with their Board of Education. They've worked very, very hard in making sure their students are getting the right curriculum, the right type of exposure in school. And, regionalizing these type of services and trying to get a one size fits all, you would find that the communities are so diverse and so different. Let's say New Haven and Orange, for example, that would be a very difficult marriage when it comes to something like education or some of the more fine type of things. So I think regionalization is something to look at. I think Mayor Blake spoke about meeting together with the COGS, where a number of municipalities can discuss what areas they have in common and develop certain processes that are better suited by regional support. But at the same time, I think we have to leave it up to the cities what's important to them to identify as sovereign type programs. As far as sewage is concerned, the only experience that I have, again, having three different towns with three different characteristics, Milford has claimed to be well sewaged, and I'll take their word for it. Orange is very heavily well water and not really public water, and they have their own personal issues. And West Haven, we've had some issues just this summer with brown water and constituents complaining about it. And it took quite a while for that issue to be addressed. And so I think infrastructure, sewage infrastructure, based on the community and its needs going forward, especially if some of these bills are going to pass and add additional stress to the sewage and to the ecosystem and the environment. I think these are very, very important issues to consider, and I'm not sure each municipality is financially positioned to be able to make the infrastructure adjustments they need to make in order to meet that demand. So I do think we need to walk slowly and carefully in that area.
Thank you, Representative Ferraro. And Representative Smith.
I'm here. I'm just trying to lost my my Zoom feed. Here we go. Sorry about that, Senator. Yeah,
We're all used to it in the Zoom world that we live in now.
Right, and I didn't mute myself, so I'm glad there was my dog didn't start barking. I've got to know a lot of my colleagues' pets through this Zoom world we all live in. As I said, I mean, we've been in Hartford. I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've been there this year, and it's always dark, and it's not what I had envisioned. But I'm hoping that things will be normal next year, and I can have the real state capital experience instead of, but I have a feeling, in fact, I'm just reading an email from a constituent saying how things will probably still continue this way because there are conveniences to it that I think everybody admits, but I'd like to be able to come and meet with everybody in person as I think is what the process always envisioned. But on the matter of local sovereignty, I think all of us on this call recognize that we're going through a very unique, I think, and historic time in our country's history. And I said this when I was campaigning. I felt that once this black cloud, that once this curtain lifts again and we're back to our normal routines and our normal ways of governance, I think there's an awful lot that we will have learned from these past year and then some of the COVID era that is going to transform the way we live, the way we govern, and the way we see our own world. And I think there's an opportunity that can all be for the better. There's a huge infusion of money coming through that we haven't seen since World War II. And I would argue that what we've just been through is probably the biggest cataclysm that the United States has faced since World War II. I think it's going to be usher in a new era where there will be more bipartisanship on a number of things that have been neglected, including infrastructure, including housing, including making things fair and more accessible to everyone in our society. And I have no argument with as I said, with the intentions of a lot of this. But when you were talking about the issue of regionalism, there was a time in this state when a lot of the state governance came through the county system, which was abandoned, more than 50 years ago for all intents and purposes. And it seems in some of these things, with some of these new bills that are being proposed, that we're moving back toward that. I see certain things in the 4 or 5 bills we've discussed today, including zoning training for zoning enforcement officers, that I can understand the significance and the importance of that. I know there's been some effort made on behalf of the strong proponents of these bills to allow for more local self-determination, and I applaud that as well. But I think that this is not an opportunity for fear or for suspicion. I think it's a time that we can probably reach across the aisle, both in the committees and on the floor of the legislature, as well as in every town hall and community center in this state, to work towards some of our common goals and our common aspirations. But at this point, too, I want to be sure that we have a voice, and that even though we are citizens of our respective towns, we are citizens of the state of Connecticut. We are citizens of the United States. And I think what's going to come is that we go to the end of the year and things do return to normal, that this can be a better place. And this is the opportunity to do it and to discuss this frankly and without political bias or expectations that we can't fulfill. I hope that we have more of these meetings and maybe get more of the community involved so everyone can understand that there are merits to all of these proposals, and there are also certain aspects of it that I can understand people's fear and suspicion, and I think it's something that we need to address and to become through opportunities like this meeting, to share it with the larger community and to fulfill some of those post-COVID the post-COVID world that I hope will be a better place for us all.
Absolutely, and what an appropriate closing thought, Representative Smith. And indeed, the goal truly was to move from the unknown, give information, and have a real collaborative dialogue. Democrats, Republicans, independents, municipal, state, local. It was my goal through this process. So, and I'm so grateful to have everybody participate. If I may, we're going to the end of this program, but as a quick closing for each individual, Mayor Blake, if you could let the audience know how they could get a hold of you, and each of the respective representatives, if you could just make a quick closing statement, and also extend how people can get in touch with you through either your website or your email, what would be the best way? I'll defer to you, but I'll start with Mayor Blake, who's also the Chief Chamber of Commerce and well sewered and everything else. And I've been so impressed. And thank you very much for joining us. It's really appreciated by me, and your insights are very much valued.
No, I appreciate it, Senator. I am the head cheerleader for our town, and I take pride in that. But I really appreciate you bringing us together and providing additional information, additional opportunity for dialogue. I am always accessible. My direct line is 203-783-3201, or you can email me at mayor@milfordct.gov.
Thank you, Mayor Blake. Kathy.
Thank you, Senator. And I wanted to thank you also for bringing this together. One of the things I would just say is, again, these bills may be looking towards solutions, but I think the people that know their towns the best are planning and zoning boards, because they are members of the town. They're elected by our town. They know our town the best. So I think it's important that we take a look at that when we move forward with these bills and are really looking at them. You know, that we're all unique, as we originally said before. So, and as far as reaching me, you can always reach me at kathy.kennedy@housegop.ct.gov, or I think that's probably the best way to reach me.
Okay,
Or my
thank
Facebook
you.
page. It's all right on my page. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Leonard, and thank you, everyone.
Yep. Representative Farrow.
Thank you, Senator Hwang, and thank you, Mayor Blake, for taking your time out of your busy schedule and spending it with us and my colleagues. It's always great to hear everybody's opinion on subjects like this and how they affect the towns that we represent. I hope that the people listening to this presentation tonight have gleaned some additional information, as was our purpose, and in keeping with our goal, which is to be able to serve you. If there's anyone that would like to contact me with any concerns they have regarding these bills or any other bills, I can be reached at charles.ferraro@house.gov.connecticut. My personal phone number, which is I have with me all the time, is 203-410-3207. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Representative Farrow. Representative Smith, take us home.
Thank you, Senator Hwang. Well, if people are reaching me in my capacity as a state representative, which is my new job, the links on the Connecticut General Assembly website will get you here. My direct phone number right to my cell phone is 475-422-2263. My email address, which I'm sitting in front of all the time, is similar to Kathy and Charlie's, which is frank.smith@cga.ct.gov, and that rings up right in front of me. If you're calling about potholes and local things for the aldermen, you can reach me at either of those addresses, but also the directory on the Milford government website also will connect you directly to my cell phone or to my email address.
Well, Representative Smith, not only are you the alderman, and obviously you're offering to fix potholes, and as a state representative, I also have to tell you, you got a huge fan in your son, Chris Smith, and a granddad at that right now. So a big shout out to your son, who I'm a huge fan of. So thank you all very, very much. And again, thank you to the audience for listening in. And truly, the intent is to inform, engage, and try to create solutions. And I want to thank all of you for taking time from your busy schedule. And so the forum's over. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody have a safe week, and be safe and healthy. Take care.
Thank you, Senator.
Good
Appreciate
night,
it.
all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
good night, everyone.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye.
Bye.